In 1492, 3 small ships left Spain, chasing a dream beyond the map. The ocean fought back. Storms, hunger, and mutiny threatened to sink it all. Then, a cry from the mast. Birds and land on the horizon. Columbus stepped onto new shores, flag in hand, facing a world his people had never imagined. And when he returned, Spain hailed him a hero, as history changed forever.
Hey guys, tonight we set foot on one of the most infamous ships in history. A creaking wooden vessel barely large enough to haul barrels of salted meat and a handful of nervous sailors, yet destined to sail straight into the unknown. You stand at the dock of Palos de la Frontera in Spain, squinting against the morning sun, and already you can smell what your life is about to become at her: fish guts, sweat, and the faint promise of vomit. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this voyage. Few people would. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing the map light up with night owls, early birds, and those mysterious folks listening at 3 AM, for reasons I will not question. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in Palos is thick with brine and gossip. Word has spread about this Genoese sailor Cristobal Colon to the Spanish, Christopher Columbus to the Italians, who convinced the monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella to fund his grand scheme. He swears the riches of Asia lie just across the ocean. Most people in town mutter that he's half mad. You, though, are about to find out firsthand because your name has been scribbled onto the crew list, squeezed between sailors promised wages they'll never quite receive, and criminals offered a clean slate if they survive. The ship itself, the Niña or the Pinta, or perhaps the Santa Maria, does not inspire confidence. Forget the paintings of mighty galleons. This thing looks like a fishing boat that accidentally wandered into greatness. It creaks even while moored. Wooden planks gape slightly at their seams, as if sighing in protest against the idea of crossing an entire ocean. Pitch has been smeared into the cracks, but you can already see where the tar bubbles threatening leaks before the anchor is even raised. Sailors mill around, carrying coils of rope, barrels of salted cod, and sacks of hard biscuits so stiff they might double as roofing tiles. A boy scrambles up the rigging barefoot, his toes gripping the rope with the ease of long practice. He grins down at you, missing 2 teeth, as if to say, "You're not ready for this." The officers bark orders in rapid Castilian, and you notice the hierarchy instantly. Captains and pilots walk stiff-backed, their boots clean, and their clothes only faintly sweat-stained. The ordinary sailors you included already smell like bilge water, even before stepping aboard. There's no mistaking your place in this floating society. You'll eat last, sleep last, and if things go poorly, you'll be blamed first. As the dockhands release the mooring ropes, the ship jerks slightly, nudged by the tide. Cheers erupt half-heartedly from some of the crew. You, however, feel a sick twist in your stomach. That horizon out there shimmering in the August heat of 1492 isn't a promise. It's a threat. No one knows what lies beyond. Some whisper about sea monsters, gaping maws waiting to swallow whole ships. Others mutter about the edge of the world, where the ocean simply spills into void. Even though educated men insist the earth is round, sailors still hedge their bets with prayers and charms. You shuffle to your station, clutching rough hemp rope that immediately burns your palms. Orders bark again, and sails begin to unfurl, flapping like enormous, unwilling wings. The ship groans forward, carried by the wind, and the coastline of Spain begins to shrink behind you. That sight-red tiled roofs, olive groves, the familiar spires of churches fades into a hazy line. Some men cross themselves. One spits into the water, as if to seal a pact with the sea. The first hours are a blur of confusion. Everything is loud. Gulls shrieking, timbers creaking, men shouting, the sea slapping against the hull. You realise quickly that this voyage will not be quiet or dignified. It will be constant motion, constant sound, constant discomfort. Your stomach lurches as the ship rolls. Seasickness does not discriminate. Hardened sailors vomit over the side with the same despair as wide-eyed novices. The deck stinks of bile, fish and tar. There's a brief moment of wonder as dolphins appear, racing the ship, leaping alongside as though mocking your lumbering progress. Sailors grin for the first time all day. Good luck, someone mutters. Historians still argue whether such omens genuinely boosted morale, or whether they were just small distractions from fear. But in that moment you're grateful for anything that isn't nausea or dread. As dusk falls, the ship settles into a rhythm. Lanterns flicker. Men find corners to collapse into, some whispering prayers, others already snoring. You curl into your assigned space-hard planks with barely enough room to stretch. The smell of damp wood and sweat is overwhelming. You try to close your eyes, but every creak and splash reminds you that Spain is behind you, and ahead lies only endless water. And yet, despite the fear, there's a sliver of awe. You've left behind everything familiar and are now part of a gamble that could change the world. You may not survive, chances are high that you won't, but history has a way of remembering those who gamble, even if it forgets the nameless souls stacked in the hammocks below deck. The first days at sea are supposed to feel like freedom, so the officers say, but for you, they feel like the inside of a swaying coffin. The shore has long since faded behind the curve of the horizon, and now the world is only sea and sky. Two endless mirrors pressing in from above and below. The excitement that briefly crackled when the sails first snapped full has already drained away. What remains is nausea, sweat, and the constant groan of timber. You sit hunched near the gunwale, gripping the edge of the ship as though you might fall into the sea at any moment. To be honest, you might prefer falling. Seasickness is not a dignified disease. It is an unrelenting betrayal of your stomach. Your head spins, your tongue tastes sour, and every rise and fall of the deck feels like being shoved into a barrel and rolled downhill. You hear the retching chorus of your shipmates, dozens of men, even the seasoned ones bent double, vomiting into the ocean. A gull circles overhead, perhaps waiting for scraps. If gulls could laugh, this one surely would. Food is offered, but it's hardly appetizing. Salt pork that seems older than you are, biscuits so hard they could chip teeth, and water that already smells faintly of rot. You try to chew, but the ship lurches and your stomach revolts. You spit it out, hoping no one notices. Don't worry, a sailor mutters beside you. By the third day you won't have anything left to throw up. He grins, but it isn't a kind grin. It's the grin of someone who knows misery is contagious. Below deck, the air is worse. Imagine a cellar built of wood, sealed with pitch, and stuffed with bodies that all share the same problem of seasickness. Sweat drips from beams. Hammocks sway so closely you can touch the man beside you just by twitching your elbow, and the stench is a cocktail of vomit, wet wool, tar, and fear. You realise quickly that the ocean itself might smell fresher, even if it drowns you. Historians still argue whether Columbus himself ever ventured below deck during these early days. Some accounts suggest he remained above, pacing like a caged lion, fretting over charts and stars. Others imagine him down among the men, trying to rally morale with speeches about glory and gold. Either way, his presence doesn't soothe your rolling stomach. You don't care about Cathay or spices or imaginary gold mines. You care about the fact that you haven't stopped sweating for hours and the horizon won't stop bobbing. Quirks of sailor life emerge quickly. One man ties garlic around his neck, insisting it wards off seasickness. Another chews on citrus peels, though where he got them no one quite knows. Someone else claims the secret is lying perfectly still on your back, as if you were already a corpse. None of it works. You try them all anyway. Anything is better than the unending sway. Night falls, but there is no peace. The ship creaks with every wave, sails flap and ropes groan. Rats scuttle across the planks, bold as landlords. They know the food stores better than the sailors do, and you're fairly sure they'll be the real victors of this voyage. A rat pauses to sniff your hand before darting away. You don't even have the energy to shoo it. One curious detail: phosphorescence. At night the sea sometimes glows faintly, a green shimmer rippling with the ship's wake. Men gather at the railing, whispering about spirits and omens. Some swear it's the souls of drowned sailors guiding the way. Others argue it's just fish stirring up strange sea fire. Historians still debate whether Columbus's crew interpreted this phenomenon as encouragement or dread. To you, it's both. It's beautiful, but it also feels like the sea is alive and watching. By the third dawn, seasickness eases a little, but other discomforts replace it. Your skin itches from damp clothes that never seem to dry. Salt crusts your hair, lips crack, and your eyes sting from constant wind. Even sitting feels exhausting, as though the sea itself is draining you. Worse yet, the novelty of the voyage has evaporated. The first days make it clear. There will be no heroic adventure here, only a long, grinding endurance test. One sailor, leaning against the mast, sighs and says, "If this is just the beginning, imagine the middle. You don't want to." Still, there's a strange rhythm forming. Bells mark the passage of time. Shifts of work and rest rotate like clockwork. You learn when to pull a rope, when to duck, when to stand aside as an officer strides past. The chaos is becoming routine, but the routine is no less miserable. This, you realize, is life now. Nausea, noise, and the endless nothing of the sea. By now you've discovered that the ocean is less a place and more a prison, and the cell you're locked in is only about 80 feet long. The cramped quarters press down on you like a second skin. Forget any notion of privacy. Every cough, every snore, every groan is shared with 50 other bodies. You can't even scratch yourself without bumping into a hammock, a shoulder, or a rat bold enough to scurry across your blanket as if it paid rent. The hammocks themselves sag like wilted spiderwebs slung just inches apart. If you stretch, your knuckles brush the man beside you. If you sneeze, half the crew sneezes with you. There's a rhythm to the snoresome low and steady, others sharp and wheezing that becomes the ship's lullaby. But you don't sleep much, not when lice treat you like an all-night buffet. Within days your scalp prickles, your wrists itch, and your ankles burn from the tiny invaders. The older sailors shrug. If they don't bite, they're dead. Better they stay hungry. It's the kind of joke that makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time. Above deck, it's not much better. Every corner is occupied by ropes, barrels, and men trying to carve out scraps of space. You squeeze against the gunwale to gulp fresh air, but even there, the stink of tar and urine clings. Buckets are the closest thing to toilets, and they slosh perilously when the ship pitches. You learn quickly to keep your shoes on. Historians still argue whether the Nina and Pinta were refitted caravels with slightly more space than the Santa Maria, or whether all three ships were equally claustrophobic nightmares. Either way, you don't care. To you, it feels like living inside a wooden drawer that someone keeps shaking. One quirk of shipboard life is how quickly boundaries dissolve. Men strip down to their shirts to escape the heat, airing out sores and scars without shame. You know intimate details about your bunkmates you never wanted, who snores like a sawmill, who talks in his sleep, who scratches at old wounds. The closeness erases modesty, but it doesn't erase tempers. Arguments spark over the smallest things: a stolen piece of bread, a hammock rope cut too short, a careless elbow in the night. The officers keep their distance, both physically and socially. They're cabins, if you can call them. There are no palaces, but they have walls and doors, and that already feels like luxury. You hear muffled conversations, the scrape of a quill, the clink of better wine. Out here you sip tepid water from a shared cask and hope the next gulp doesn't taste like mould. Quirky details slip into the monotony. Someone teaches you sailors' knots in the dark, fingers working as nimbly as if they were reading Braille. Another man carves crude faces into bits of driftwood, tiny companions to ward off madness. One crewman insists on telling the same story every night, about a tavern girl in Cadiz who once winked at him. You begin to suspect half the voyage is held together by lies, jokes, and sheer stubbornness. And then there are the smells. You cannot escape them. Sweat clings to every garment. Fish guts from bait barrels rot in the sun. Bilge water sloshes below with the scent of 1,000 drowned rats. Even the sails stink, steeped in tar and salt. You breathe it in until you forget what fresh air smelled like on land. At times, though, the misery is broken by moments of strangeness. A shoal of flying fish bursts from the water one morning, skipping across the waves like silver stones. The crew cheers and grabs a few, frying them on a hot iron plate as a rare treat. For an hour it almost feels like a feast. Later, phosphorescent plankton makes the wake glow so brightly it looks like the ship is carving fire into the sea. Some sailors cross themselves, others whisper about witches. Historians still debate whether sailors leaned on superstition more than skill, but you know one thing. The glow makes you feel watched. At night, when the ship settles into uneasy silence, you lie awake in your hammock, staring at the shifting shadows of ropes and beams above you. The air is so still below deck that you feel like you're breathing the same stale breath everyone else has already exhaled. You close your eyes, but your ears stay open, straining against the symphony of snores, coughs, and creaks. Sleep is not rest here, it is surrender. And through it all, a quiet thought gnaws at you. This is only the beginning. You're still close to Spain, still in familiar waters, and already life feels unbearable. What will it be like when the land disappears entirely, when weeks stretch into months, when the horizon offers nothing but blue emptiness? You don't want to imagine it. But the ship rocks, the hammocks sway, and imagination is all you have. Food and water, two things you once took for granted, become the daily gamble that decides whether you endure another week or collapse into the bilge. At first, there's a kind of novelty in it. Salted pork carved into rough slabs, hard biscuits called ship's tack, and dried peas boiled until they resemble grey mush. But the novelty fades faster than the wind in a dead calm. Within days, you're chewing with suspicion, half afraid of what your teeth might discover. The biscuits, for example, are so dense you could use one to shingle a roof. You crack one open, and if you're unlucky, find a tiny weevil wriggling inside. The older sailors don't flinch, they just flick out the worm and keep eating. Extra protein, they joke. You try it once, and the crunch stays in your teeth longer than you'd like. Some men even prefer the bugs proof the biscuit hasn't gone entirely stale. That's the kind of logic this voyage teaches you. Salt pork is no better. It's been brined for months, maybe years, stored in barrels that sweat under the sun. When you pry it out, the meat is grey, greasy, and smells like something that should be buried. Yet hunger overrules disgust. You gnaw on it, hoping the salt will disguise the taste. It doesn't. The pork fights back, chewing tougher than leather. You imagine this is what a shoe sole might taste like if you boiled it long enough. And then there's the water. Oh, the water. At first, the casks yield drinkable gulps, if not exactly refreshing. But already, after only a short time at sea, the liquid grows sour. The wooden barrels warp in the heat, letting in air, and the water stagnates. You tip the cup and smell rote-earthy, mouldy, tinged with something you don't want to name. Drink it anyway or dehydrate. Those are the choices. One sailor mutters that he prefers to close his eyes and pretend it's wine. Another splashes it with vinegar, hoping the sharpness will drown the taste. Historians still argue whether Columbus rationed water fairly, or whether officers got the fresher share while common sailors swallowed the sludge. Either way, the memory of clear rivers and clean wells on land feels like a cruel dream. You begin to envy the gulls that can sip sea water and fly on. Quirky little rituals emerge around mealtime. Men knock their biscuits against the table to shake out insects before biting. Some dip hardtack into their foul water, softening it into a paste you can almost swallow without breaking a tooth. A few chew tobacco instead, tricking their stomachs into thinking they're full. Hunger makes creativity bloom in all the wrong ways. Occasionally a fish is caught tuna or dorado, hauled up shimmering from the deep. That's a good day. The meat is fresh. The taste a reminder that food doesn't have to fight you on the way down. You savour every bite, knowing it might be weeks before the sea offers such mercy again. But mostly, meals are endurance tests. You sit cross-legged on the deck, balancing a wooden bowl in one hand and a spoon in the other, trying not to think about how many mouths have slurped from the same cask. The sun beats down, sweat drips, and the smell of rancid fat clings to your fingers no matter how hard you scrub with salt water. Even at night, hunger nags. You lie in your hammock, belly aching, dreaming of bread that bends instead of cracks, of fruit that drips juice instead of mould. You would give anything for a slice of cheese that isn't crawling, or a jug of ale still frothing. Sailors swap stories of feasts they left behind, roasted lamb, fresh olives, sweet figs. The talk is torture, yet they can't help it. One man claims he once ate an entire goose by himself. Another swears his wife makes bread so soft it melts on your tongue. You close your eyes and let the fantasy carry you, even as your mouth waters uselessly. And then, of course, there are the rats. Bold, clever, and endlessly hungry. They gnaw at the food stores as if mocking the humans. Some nights you hear them squeaking inside the barrels. When desperation grows, sailors catch and cook them. You gag at the thought, but after enough days of hardtack and pork, the smell of roasting rat begins to smell like hope. This is the truth of the voyage. You're not nourished so much as kept alive, just enough to keep hauling ropes and swabbing decks. Food is not pleasure, it's punishment disguised as sustenance. And water? Water is a reminder that even the simplest blessing can sour when trapped too long in a barrel. By the time your stomach has resigned itself to salted leather and wormy biscuits, the real fear begins to gnaw at the edges of your mind, not hunger, not thirst, but stories. Sailors are, if nothing else, collectors and exchangers of tales, and in the close darkness of the deck at night, when the ship rocks like a cradle and the lanterns swing low, those stories crawl out like rats. You hear them whispered first in fragments. Sea monsters with eyes the size of shields, serpents so long they could wrap around the ship 3 times and still lash their tails, giant birds that swoop down to carry sailors off as if they were mice. An older man swears he once saw an island that floated here one day, gone the next. He insists the sea is alive, shifting its shape to trick men deeper and deeper until it swallows them whole. But the worst story, the one that makes men glance nervously at the horizon, is the edge. The end of the world. You've been told that educated men, astronomers, scholars, even Columbus himself, believe the Earth is round. Yet superstition clings tighter than salt. What if the ocean really does drop off into nothing? What if one day the ship simply slides down a waterfall of infinity, never to return? The thought keeps you awake more than the lice do. Historians still argue how common this fear really was. Some claim the sailors knew well enough that the Earth was round, while others insist that superstition ran strong among common folk. On this ship, packed with desperate men promised wages and pardons, fear doesn't need facts to breathe. It lives in the silence after the stories are told, when everyone pretends not to believe, but no one laughs too loudly. To ward off bad luck, charms dangle from necks and belts, a tiny carved cross, a seashell strung on rope, a scrap of parchment with a prayer written in shaky ink. One sailor even carries a dried frog, claiming it will keep storms away. Another draws protective circles in the air every time he passes the mast. If you ask him why, he shrugs. Why not? Better to be safe. There are also strange rituals before sleep. Some men mutter the Lord's Prayer in rapid-fire whispers, as if racing the devil to the Amen. Others knock 3 times on the planks, hoping to summon good spirits from the wood. And then there are the song-slow, droning chants in languages you barely recognize. They rise and fall with the sway of the ship, haunting lullabies that sound older than the voyage itself. Quirky as they seem, these rituals stitch the crew together. You notice that even Columbus himself sometimes fingers a rosary a little too tightly, his lips moving in private prayers when he thinks no one is watching. For all his confidence about Asia waiting just beyond the waves, even he must wrestle with the dark, and the dark is deep out here. Nights stretch like black velvet, sky and sea blending into a single void. Stars prick through, countless and cold, but they only make the darkness feel larger. You stare upward, trying to find comfort in constellations, but instead you feel small, a speck tossed into eternity. Someone points out a shooting star and whispers, "An omen." You don't ask if it's good or bad. One evening, as you sit against the rail, a faint glow flickers beneath the waves. It swirls and shifts like ghostly fire. The sailors murmur some claim it's St. Elmo's fire. Others call it the souls of drowned men guiding the way. Historians still debate what the crew truly believed, but in that moment you are less concerned with scholarship and more with the way the light curls around the hull, as if reaching for you. You shiver, even though the air is warm. Superstition seeps into daily work as well. If a rope slips from your hands, someone hisses that you've angered the sea. If a gull circles too many times overhead, the men nod grimly. It means storms are coming. If the wind dies suddenly, the silence feels cursed, as though the ocean is holding its breath. Every accident becomes a sign, every creak a message. You find yourself caught in it too. You knock on the plank sometimes, just in case. You whisper a quick prayer when your stomach growls too loudly. You catch yourself scanning the horizon for shadows of monsters, even though you know none should exist. The line between belief and doubt blurs quickly when you're surrounded by nothing but water, and in the quietest hours, when you curl in your hammock and the ship creaks like an old man's bones, you wonder which is worse, the chance of storms and hunger and disease, or the possibility that the stories are true, that something waits out there, beyond the reach of Spain, beyond the stars, where the sea simply ends. By now you've discovered there is no such thing as free time on a ship like this. Even when your belly aches from hardtack and your mind spins with superstitions, the work never stops. The sea demands labour, and the officers make sure no one forgets it. Life becomes a cycle of watches and tasks marked not by clocks, but by the ringing of a bell and the shift of the stars. You learn quickly that the ship divides the day into watches, chunks of hours where certain men stand ready and others collapse into hammocks. There is no sunrise to sunset rhythm, just an endless loop of duty and exhaustion. The bell clangs, voices bark, and you haul yourself upright, muscles stiff, eyes gummy with half sleep. One moment you're dragging ropes, the next you're swabbing decks, then you're stumbling down to your hammock for what feels like 5 minutes before you're shaken awake again. The work itself is brutal. Ropes, rough as sandpaper, burn your palms until blisters bloom and pop. Tar seeps into your skin so deep you begin to think your fingernails will be black forever. You haul sails so heavy they snap your shoulders backward while the sun beats down, turning the deck into an oven. Your shirt clings with sweat, your hair crusts with salt, and your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. Every man has a task. Some scrub planks with seawater until they shine. Others climb into the rigging to reef sails, and still others pump out the bilge where foul water sloshes endlessly. There are no easy jobs. Even the boy who runs messages between officers trips over ropes and earns more curses than thanks. You discover that the sea is not just vast, it is a machine that must be tended constantly, and you are one of its sweating, aching gears. Historians still argue whether Columbus's ships were well disciplined, or whether chaos ruled beneath the surface. From your perspective, the answer is clear. Both. The officers bark and threaten, and for a while the men obey. But discipline erodes in the heat and the stench. when fatigue makes hands slow and tempers quick. A dropped rope sparks shouting, a missed command earns a cuff across the head. The hierarchy holds, but barely, like tar smeared into a leaking seam. There are quirks in the daily rhythm that almost feel comical. The cook, for example, does his work over an iron firebox bolted to the deck, its smoke trailing into the sails like a strange banner. Meals are ladled out with no ceremony, slop into a bowl, slop into a hand, slop into your lap if you're unlucky. Men fight over scraps of fat floating in the pot. When the stew is gone, the cook shrugs and waves you away, as if hunger were a nuisance to be ignored. Another oddity. The ship's carpenter is always busy, hammering, sawing, patching leaks. The Santa Maria creaks like an old mule, and the Nina and Pinta are hardly better. Wood swells and shrinks with salt water, ropes fray, nails pop. You realise that the ship is not a finished thing but a constant project, stitched together day after day. Without the carpenter and his hammer, you suspect the ocean would already have swallowed you. And then there's the sun. It beats down relentlessly, baking the tar until it bubbles, burning skin until it peels. Shade is scarce, and hats blow away with the wind. You wrap a rag around your head, but the salt stiffens it until it feels like wearing sandpaper. Some men strip to their waists, shoulders blistering red. Others smear grease on their skin, swearing it helps. You long for the cool of night. Though night brings its own burdens, cold air, damp hammocks, and the endless watch. The watches blur together. You lose track of days, unsure whether you've worked for a week or a year. Bells ring, ropes creak, officers shout, waves slap, and through it all you haul, scrub and stagger. Sleep becomes a rare currency, traded in scraps and stolen moments. Sometimes you dream of silence, only to wake to the slap of a rope against the mast. But the sea is not without its strange gifts. Some mornings the air smells startlingly fresh, as if the world has been washed clean. Flying fish leap onto the deck and men laugh as they fry them in the galley. A pod of dolphins keeps pace for hours, their sleek bodies flashing silver in the sun. For a moment the work lightens, and you feel a flicker of awe life still thrives in this endless blue, even if you're barely hanging on. Still, as you coil ropes with aching fingers, you realise the truth. You're not a passenger on a voyage of discovery. You're a cog in a ceaseless grind, measured not in leagues crossed but in blisters earned. And the sea? The sea doesn't care whether you discover a continent or vanish into its depths. It only cares that you keep working. Just when you think you've learned the rhythms of the voyage, haul, scrub, collapse, the sea reminds you who is in charge. A storm arrives without ceremony, a grey bruise spreading across the horizon faster than you can blink. At first it's only a shift in the wind, a smell like iron in the air, a sudden silence among the gulls. Then the clouds tower higher, darker, as though the sky itself is rolling up its sleeves to fight. The officers bark orders, and suddenly the deck is chaos. Sails must be reefed before the wind rips them to shreds, ropes coiled tight, barrels lashed down. You stumble over planks slick with spray, hauling lines that fight like living snakes. The sky growls, then cracks open with thunder. Rain pelts your face so hard it feels like gravel. The ship heaves and lurches, timbers groaning as though protesting their own foolishness. Water sloshes across the deck, swirling around your ankles, tugging at your boots. The horizon vanishes, ski and sea fuse into one furious shifting mass. You grab a rope and cling until your arms burn, because if you slip you won't even make a splash before the ocean swallows you whole. Sailors shout prayers, curses, and half-forgotten charms. One man ties a scrap of cloth to the mast, muttering that it will appease the storm. Another falls to his knees in the rain, crossing himself so quickly his fingers blur. Historians still argue whether sailors in Columbus's time saw storms as punishments from God or just hazards of nature, but in this moment, belief doesn't matter. What matters is survival. The captain shouts above the roar, his voice a whip against the gale. Columbus points toward the sails, eyes wide with determination, but even he looks pale under the flicker of lightning. You imagine he's rehearsing his speech for the Queen in his head, hoping he'll live long enough to deliver it. The rain doesn't just soak, it invades. Clothes cling to your body, heavy and cold, turning your limbs into lead. Salt water burns your eyes, your throat, your cracked lips. Your fingers slip on the ropes until they bleed. The storm hammers down for hours that feel like years, the ship tossing so violently that men are flung like dice across the deck. A barrel breaks free, rolling with murderous intent until 3 sailors wrestle it into submission. At one point, lightning strikes so close the mast glows blue with St. Elmo's fire, a ghostly flame licking along the wood. For a moment everyone stares, silent, convinced it's either a miracle or a warning. You don't know which, and you don't want to find out. Below deck it's worse. Water leaks through seams, dripping onto hammocks already soaked with sweat. The bilge fills faster than men can pump, and the stench of rot thickens as barrels topple. Rats flee from corners, scampering across men's legs in panicked waves. The darkness is suffocating, punctuated only by the groans of timbers flexing under strain. You cling to the thought that wood can bend, but in the back of your mind, you wonder how much bending it takes before wood breaks. The storm finally begins to ease, not with relief, but with exhaustion. Rain softens to drizzle, thunder drifts farther away, and the sea calms from fury to grudging discontent. You're left trembling, soaked and sore, staring at bruises blooming across your arms. The ship creaks in every joint. Ropes sag, sails hang in tatters. Men slump against barrels and masts, breathing like animals after a chase. And yet, in the ragged silence that follows, laughter bubbles up. Not joyous laughter, hysterical, exhausted chuckles that say, "We should be dead, but somehow we're not." One sailor wipes blood from his forehead and grins. Another slaps you on the back so hard you almost tumble. "See?" he shouts hoarsely. "The sea tried, but we're still here." It's a strange, uneasy triumph. You've survived a storm, yes, but you also realise storms are not rare visitors. They are neighbours, and they'll come knocking again. The sea will always remind you who commands this voyage, and it isn't Columbus or the Crown or even the Pope. It's the endless, hungry ocean. You crawl into your hammock that night, still damp, ears ringing with phantom thunder. The ship rocks gently now, almost kindly, but you know better. This was only one storm. There will be more, and each time the ocean will ask the same question: how much can you endure before you break? The storm has passed, but it leaves behind more than broken ropes and bruised skin. It leaves weakness. The crew begins to cough in a way that doesn't sound like ordinary cold air rattling in the lungs. Men stagger when they stand, clutching their bellies as though something inside gnaws at them. The truth creeps in slowly, like mould spreading across the seams of a barrel. Sickness has found its place aboard. You notice it first in the gums. A sailor grins wearily after hauling rope, and you see his teeth framed by swollen purple flesh. He winces when he chews, spits blood into the sea and shrugs. "It's nothing," he mutters, though the way he presses his tongue against his teeth says otherwise. Within days the swelling worsens, teeth loosen. Some fall out entirely, leaving gaps that whistle when he tries to curse. This is scurvy, though no one aboard has that word yet. Historians still argue whether Columbus and his crew fully recognised the pattern of the disease, or simply chalked it up to the will of God. To you, there's no debate. It's the lack of anything fresh, the endless diet of salt pork and rock-hard biscuits. Your body craves green, craves juice, craves anything that grew under the sun. Instead, you gnaw leather. Other sicknesses follow. Fevers bloom in the damp quarters below deck. Men sweat and shiver, their hammocks slick with moisture. The air is so thick with coughs that you sometimes wonder if you're breathing sickness itself. Lice thrive. burrowing into scalps and seams of clothing. Rats scurry without fear, feasting on crumbs dropped by the too weak to swat them away. The ship becomes less a vessel of discovery and more a floating infirmary, and yet the work must go on. Sick men still stagger onto deck, ropes in shaking hands, eyes glazed. An officer shouts at a sailor who collapses mid-task, then waves for 2 others to drag him aside. There is no hospital, no rest ward, just a corner where the weak are left to sweat and cough, until either they rise again or they don't. You wonder how many will never see land again. Quirky remedies spring up, half desperate, half absurd. One sailor insists chewing on leather straps strengthens the gums. Another swears by rinsing the mouth with vinegar. Someone else boils sawdust into a bitter tea, claiming it wards off fevers. You try a few of these remedies, though they taste like despair itself. Still, hope is a strong drug, and you cling to it like a rope in high seas. At night the sick groans rise like a chorus. Hammocks sway with restless bodies, men muttering prayers, teeth chattering in fevered rhythms. You press your blanket tighter, but the air is damp, heavy with the scent of rot. Every cough feels like a prophecy of your own. Historians still argue whether Columbus's men carried citrus or herbal remedies that might have eased the symptoms, but in your present misery the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that your gums bleed when you bite, your legs ache when you stand, and your reflection, should you dare to see it, would show hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. Despite it all, the ocean remains indifferent. The waves rise and fall. The wind fills the sails, and dolphins leap alongside as if mocking the weakness of men. The contrast is cruel. Nature thriving, men decaying. You wonder if the sea itself is testing you, stripping flesh from spirit to see who remains standing at the end. One evening, as you sip foul water to wash down yet another crumb of hardtack, a sailor whispers beside you, "Maybe this is the punishment. Maybe we weren't meant to cross this ocean." His words settle heavier than any biscuit. You stare out at the horizon, endless, unbroken, and wonder if he's right. And yet, despite the swelling gums, the fevers, the rats, and the lice, morning still comes. The bell still rings, ropes still need hauling, sails still need trimming, deck still needs scrubbing. The ocean doesn't pause for sickness, and neither can you. You tug at a line, your hands trembling, your teeth aching, and you realise the voyage is less about discovering lands across the sea, and more about discovering just how much misery a human body can endure before it crumbles. If hunger, storms, and sickness grind down the body, then punishment grinds down the spirit. By now you've learned that life aboard a 15th century ship isn't just about surviving the sea, it's about surviving each other. Tempers fray easily in cramped quarters, and discipline is the captain's only weapon against chaos. Unfortunately, discipline usually comes wrapped in rope. You see it first when a sailor mutters too loudly about the food. The officer's face hardens, and before you know it, the man is hauled to the mast. A rope is looped around his wrists, and he's lashed until his back blooms with angry red stripes. No one cheers, no one protests. The rest of you stare at the deck, listening to the thud of rope against flesh, the muffled cries, the silence afterward. This is the lesson. Obedience isn't optional. Historians still argue whether punishments on Columbus's voyage were exceptionally harsh, or simply typical for the time. To you, there's nothing academic about it. It's raw, immediate, and terrifying. The rules feel arbitrary, too much grumbling, too little effort, a glance held too long at an officer, and suddenly you could be the one tied to the mast. Some punishments are almost absurd in their cruelty. A man caught stealing extra rations is forced to swallow seawater until he vomits, then set back to work, pale and shaking. Another sailor, slow to follow orders, is ducked thrown overboard on a rope and dragged through the waves until he sputters and coughs up half the Atlantic. He stumbles back aboard, eyes wide, skin raw, and no one dares laugh. And then there are the joke's dark humour that keeps fear at bay. A grizzled sailor whispers about a punishment called the cat-o'-nine-tails, a whip tipped with knots, though whether such a tool exists here or is only rumour hardly matters. The thought alone is enough to keep hands busy and mouths shut. Someone else jokes that the rats live better than you since they eat without being flogged. The laughter is thin, but it spreads. It's either laugh or lose your mind. Quirks of authority pepper the days. Officers sometimes punish men by docking their tiny wages most suspect they'll never see anyway. Others enforce humiliation, making a sailor scrub the deck while everyone else watches, or forcing him to eat alone in silence. These slights sting as much as the lash, because on a ship this small, isolation feels like death. The worst punishment, though, isn't physical. It's the threat of abandonment. You overhear officers reminding the crew that mutineers could be left ashore on some barren spit of land, forced to fend for themselves. The ocean is cruel, but the thought of being marooned, cut off from even the miserable company of the ship's ends, shivers deeper than any rope burn. Still, punishment has its strange side effects. You notice that after a flogging, the crew becomes briefly united, quieter, sharper in their work. No one wants to be next. Fear smooths the edges of rebellion, even if only for a while. But the resentment simmers, a stew kept just below boiling. Men whisper when the officers' backs are turned. You sense it building, like pressure in the timbers, waiting for the right wave to crack it open. At night, you curl into your hammock, rubbing your raw hands, and you think about justice. On land, crimes have courts, trials, even mercy. Here, justice is whatever the man in charge says it is. The sea is endless, but the world you inhabit is smaller than a tavern floor. Ruled by voices that grow harsher as the days drag on, you whisper a half-joke to yourself, trying to ease the knot in your chest. At least the lice don't punish you for scratching. It almost makes you smile, almost. But when you close your eyes, you still hear the thud of rope, the splash of a man dragged through waves, the silence of fear clamped tight in every throat. And you wonder not for the first time whether the sea will break your body or whether the men beside you will break your spirit first. You've grown used to the routines, the lash of the rope, the rot of the water, the itch of lice, but what still unsettles you most is how fragile the entire voyage feels. Navigation, the very act of knowing where you are and where you're going, turns out to be a mixture of math, prayer, and outright guesswork. The captain paces with charts under his arm, squinting at the horizon, then at the stars, then back at his compass. He mutters calculations, scribbles numbers, and scratches them out again. Columbus insists he knows what he's doing, but you catch the flicker of doubt even in his eyes. One slip of judgment, one clouded night without stars, and the ship could be sailing in circles while everyone pretends otherwise. Historians still argue whether Columbus lied to his men about the true distances travelled, deliberately underreporting mileage to keep panic at bay. Some suggest he wanted to shield them from despair. Others say he wanted to protect his pride. To you, it makes little difference. Whether the log says 30 leagues or 50, the reality is the same. You're adrift in a world where the only landmarks are waves. At night, the officers stand with astrolabes, measuring the angle of stars as though heaven itself were a map. The sailors watch nervously, whispering that it's all nonsense, that no man can truly measure God's lanterns. One mutters that he trusts birds more than stars. At least birds know where they're going, he says, spitting into the sea. Quirky debates break out among the crew. Some argue the compass is bewitched, its needle forever pointing north must be sorcery. Others claim that seaweed floating on the surface is a truer guide, a sign of land nearby. You even hear a man swear by the taste of the water. Saltier means deeper, he says, licking a finger like a connoisseur of misery. Columbus himself projects confidence, striding across the deck with a certainty that feels more like theatre than truth. He speaks of Cathay, of gold, of spices waiting just beyond the horizon, yet in quieter moments you glimpse him fingering his rosary, lips moving in private prayer. Perhaps even he wonders if he's guiding men to fortune or to doom. The tension grows each day without land in sight. The horizon remains an unbroken line of blue taunting you. Some mornings the sea is so still it looks like molten glass, the ship frozen in its reflection. Other days the wind drives you fast, waves leaping, but still nothing appears. Time stretches, hope shrinks. You take your turn at the rail, staring into the endless expanse, and you try to imagine the captain's burden. 100 men, stacked in hammocks and chewing worms out of biscuits, are placing their lives on his calculations. If he is wrong, you will never know it until it is too late. The odd details of navigation seep into your awareness. You learn how to read a knotline dropped into the sea, measuring speed by how quickly it unspools. You listen as the pilot records the number, scratching into his log with steady hands. It all seems precise until the wind shifts, or a current tugs, or a cloud covers the moon. Then precision evaporates, and you're left with a feeling somewhere between hope and guesswork. Historians still argue whether Columbus truly believed he was sailing straight toward Asia, or whether he half expected to stumble onto something else entirely. The debate doesn't comfort you. To a sailor hauling ropes and scratching at lice, it's irrelevant. All that matters is whether there is land ahead or only more blue emptiness. At night, lying in your hammock, you listen to the timbers creak and wonder what it feels like to be lost without knowing it. Maybe you already are. Maybe the captain's numbers are wrong, the stars misleading, the compass bewitched. You close your eyes and picture Spain, solid and real, and then open them to nothing but dark waves. And the cruelest thought of all creeps in. Perhaps there is no land at all. Perhaps the maps were right in their blank spaces and the sea stretches forever. If that's true, then no calculation, no compass, no prayer can save you. The ship is a cork in God's wineglass, bobbing until he decides to tip it over. You pull your blanket tighter and whisper to yourself, "He must know where we are." You want to believe it. You need to. But deep inside, you wonder if even Columbus is only pretending to see a path across the void. By now, the ship has been at sea longer than most men can stomach, and the air is thick not only with the stench of sweat and rot but also with whispers. Whispers that grow louder when officers pass, then hush again like waves retreating from shore. You catch fragments at first, grumblings about the food, muttered curses at the compass, nervous laughter about the endless horizon. But the tone changes. What begins as complaint slowly hardens into something sharper. Rebellion. It starts with murmurs in the hammocks at night. We've gone too far. The captain is lying about the leagues. There's no land here, only death. Men speak in low voices, voices that tremble with fear disguised as anger. Someone suggests turning back, but no one dares say it too loudly yet. The idea lingers anyway, coiled in the air like smoke. Historians still argue whether Columbus truly faced mutiny, or whether later accounts exaggerated it for drama. But standing here, you feel the tension like a rope pulled too tight. One wrong tug, and it will snap. The food worsens, the water sours, the sickness spreads, and tempers flare. A man lashes out at another over a scrap of pork. Fists fly, curses spill, and it takes 3 others to pull them apart. Later, as the loser nurses a swollen eye, he mutters, "Better to die in Spain than rot out here." The words hang heavy, echoing in your own gut. The officers sense it too. Orders come sharper, punishments harsher. A sailor caught grumbling is flogged harder than usual, as if the rope can whip rebellion out of him. But fear only fuels anger. Men grow quieter in the day, more dangerous at night. In shadows, you hear talk of forcing Columbus to turn the ships around, of seizing control before the ocean claims everyone. Quirks of human nature rise in the gloom. Some men invent lucky omens driftward spotted on the waves, a lone bird wheeling overhead, as if to convince themselves land is near. Others deliberately refuse hope, muttering that lies only make despair worse. One sailor swears he heard the sea whisper his name in the dark. Another says the rats are abandoning the ship, proof that doom is close. You don't know which thought is worse. And then there are the calculations. Every evening Columbus calls for the logs, the readings, the distances. He speaks of Cathay, of gold, of a world waiting. He insists you are close, though no shore rises to meet you. Some believe him want to believe him, and because hope is lighter to carry than fear. Others scowl, certain he's hiding the truth. You find yourself torn. His confidence is contagious, but so is the dread in your crewmate's eyes. One night, as you sway in your hammock, two sailors whisper nearby. If he doesn't find land soon, one hisses, we'll make him turn back. The other mutters, or we throw him to the sea. They chuckle grimly, but it isn't humour, it's possibility. You squeeze your eyes shut, pretending to sleep, and wonder how much of this voyage depends on wood and rope, and how much depends on men not tearing each other apart. Historians still debate the exact moment when rebellion simmered hottest, but you can feel it in every breath. It isn't a single moment, it's all moments stacked like casks in the hold, ready to topple. You realise mutiny is not just a story, it's a shadow walking beside you, waiting for its chance. And in the quiet hours when the sea is still and the stars blaze overhead, you admit to yourself a thought you dared not speak aloud. Maybe mutiny wouldn't be madness. Maybe turning back is the only sane choice. But then you remember Spain has vanished behind you, and the ocean ahead doesn't end. Either way, you're trapped in the middle of nothing, with desperation sharpening on every tongue. You curl deeper into your hammock, listening to the wood creak, the men whisper, and the ocean breathe. Tomorrow perhaps the ship will sail on, or perhaps the crew will break before land ever appears. The whispers of mutiny never really leave your ears, but when night falls, something stranger creeps into the ship. The sea itself begins to play tricks on the senses, blurring the line between exhaustion and imagination. You lie in your hammock, half asleep, when a shout drags you upright. The water's glowing! Men scramble to the rail, and sure enough the black waves shimmer with an eerie green light, as though lanterns float just beneath the surface. It's phosphorescence, though you don't have that word. To you, it looks like the ocean is alive, breathing fire beneath its skin. Some sailors mutter it's a blessing, St. Elmo's lanterns guiding the way. Others cross themselves, whispering of drowned souls rising to the surface. Historians still argue what Columbus's crew thought of such sights. Whether awe or terror won the night, but standing here the truth is both. The glow is beautiful, but beauty this far from shore feels dangerous. The nights are never silent. Wood groans like a weary animal, sails flap like giant wings, and ropes thrum in the wind. Sometimes, though, you hear more. A creak that sounds like a footstep where no one stands. A splash that seems too heavy for a fish. A low moan that could be the wind or not. The men laugh nervously, pretending not to care, but their eyes dart to the dark water as if something waits there, just out of sight. Superstition breeds quickly in sleepless hours. One sailor swears he saw a shadow pass beneath the hull, larger than any whale. Another claims he woke to find a wet handprint beside his hammock. A boy, pale with fear, insists he hears voices singing in the waves at night soft, sweet, almost lullabies. The older sailors mutter about sirens, women of the sea who lure men to their deaths. Whether they believe it or not, no one sleeps easily afterward. Quirky rituals spring up in response. Some men refuse to look directly at the glowing water, convinced it will steal their souls. Others begin tossing scraps of bread overboard, offerings to keep the sea spirits fed. One even ties a charm of knotted rope around his ankle, insisting it will keep him from being pulled overboard. You can't tell if these gestures are comforting or if they only feed the fear. And then there's the sound. Some nights, when the wind dies, the ocean seems too quiet, like a held breath. You lie awake, staring at the dark beams above, and you swear you hear murmurs, Not from men, not from rats, but from somewhere deeper. They rise and fall with the swell, a cadence that almost forms words. You tell yourself it's imagination, but the unease lingers. Historians still argue how much of the crew's fear came from real phenomena: phosphorescence, whales, shifting currents, and how much came from minds stretched thin by hunger, illness, and dread. You suspect it doesn't matter. To a man who hasn't seen land in weeks, every shadow is a monster, every sound a ghost. One night, you wake to shouting. A sailor swears he saw a figure standing on the waves, cloaked in mist. Others rush to look, but there's only the empty sea. The man shakes, eyes wide, insisting he isn't mad. "It was there," he cries. "It watched us." The officers scoff, but the men exchange uneasy glances. You don't say anything, but when you lie back down, you keep one eye open, watching the shadows dance. The ocean, you realise, doesn't need to kill you outright. It can simply wait, whispering, showing you shapes and lights until your mind crumbles. And maybe that's worse. A broken mind is no match for endless water. As dawn creeps in, painting the horizon pink, the glowing sea fades, the shadows vanish, and the ship looks almost ordinary again. Men shake their heads, laugh too loudly, and call each other fools. But when night falls again, you know the whispers will return, and the ocean will remind you once more. You are very small, and you do not belong here. The first hint that the world might not be an endless blue, nothing comes not as a shout, but as a smell thin and green, like crushed stems after rain. You're on the early watch, squinting into a bright nothing, when the wind carries it across the deck. The faint memory of leaves. You inhale so sharply you almost swallow a gnat. For weeks you've known only tar, sweat and bilge. Now your nose says something else exists. Your heart, traitor that it is, believes your nose. By midday the sea itself starts changing, as if trying on a new coat. Patches of floating weed drift past pale gold and olive mats that bump the hull with soft little thuds. The old hands call it sagasso, and the jokes start at once. There's your salad, someone grins, poking a frond with a boat hook. Don't worry, extra protein, another adds, and yes, the weevil joke still lives. You watch the trailing tendrils and feel a tingle you haven't felt since Palos, curiosity without dread attached to it. Birds arrive next, swift and purposeful, skimming low, wing beats sharp as oars. One of the officers names them terns, perhaps, or sandpipers blown far offshore, and immediately men begin pointing, counting, inventing omens. A cluster peels toward the southwest, and murmurs ripple across the deck like wind in canvas. "Follow them," someone says too loudly, as if he were telling the sun where to set. Historians still argue whether Columbus altered course around this time to chase the flight of birds, or whether the decision was already in his mind and the bird simply flattered it. Either way, the helm answers the rumour, the ship's head creeps a few points, and every back straightens an inch. The ocean adds more breadcrumbs, a reed bobs by, green as gossip. Then a small board-worked wood, not the sea's random carving. Later a branch slides past, leaves still lively, a smear of berry clinging to the stem like lipstick on a cup. A sailor yelps and lunges with the boat hook, missing by a finger's breadth, and everyone groans as if the branch were a roast carried out of reach. Next one's mine, you say, a childish claim that earns you a playful shove. It's ridiculous to feel possessive about driftwood, but hope makes children of everyone. That evening the pilot spreads his chart and talks less about distances and more about signs. The logbook, you're told, will still tally leagues, but the real map is now in the water and the air. Even the mutterers from the hammocks, those men who have been filing complaints to the darkleen on the rail, and squint like believers waiting for a miracle. The promise of a reward sweetens the air too. The word has gone around that the first man to cry land will have riches, or at least a handsome annuity, set aside by grateful sovereigns. Historians still argue how that prize was ultimately claimed and by whom. For now, It is a fantasy that keeps eyes peeled and arguments quiet. No one wants to be flogged the day before he gets paid for seeing a shoreline. Night deepens without the glowing tricks that once spooked you, and you find yourself grateful for honest darkness. You listen to the talkless poison in it now, more brag. Plans blossom like mould in a damp cask. What you'll do when you reach the Indies, what spices you'll buy, which distant king will be most impressed with your personal tale of heroism, carefully edited to exclude the vomiting. One man vows he'll bring back cinnamon enough to perfume an entire street in Palos. Another says he'll buy a hat taller than the church steeple. Gentle laughter moves through the hammocks. Even the rats seem to tread lighter, as if considering a future career in respectable kitchens. Morning reveals more gifts. A carved stick drifts by mistaking it this time, notched by hands, shaped by purpose. Men crowd so thick at the rail the ship tilts like a gossiping aunt. The boathook finally snags it, and as it's hauled aboard a low sound rises from the crew, something between a prayer and a sigh. You run a finger over the notches, shallow and regular. It is a small thing, yet it carries weight. The world you sail toward is not empty water and myths, but hands, tools, people. Historians still argue whether the famous carved stick described in the surviving accounts was truly fresh-worked or merely convincing debris. You don't care. It is warm from the sun and crowded with meaning. The birds multiply until the sky seems sprinkled with them. They travel in purposeful lines, as if commuting. A few even settle on the yard for a breathless pause, tiny feet gripping tarred wood, heads cocked as though judging your seamanship. You try not to take it personally. A sailor tosses a crumb, and a bird snatches it mid-air with the precision of a pickpocket. The deck erupts in soft cheers. It's a silly victory, but it feels like the universe returning a nod. Work goes faster now, not because the tasks have changed, but because the mind has. Ropes feel lighter, the sun less cruel. You catch yourself humming while swabbing, a sin of optimism you would have flogged a week ago. Officers notice the shift and allow themselves the smallest of smiles. Even Columbus walks the deck with something new in his gait. Not the strained theatre of certainty, but a quiet, springy confidence, as if his shoes remember what dry streets feel like. When he fingers his rosary, his lips move slower, the prayers less like bargaining and more like thanks in advance. Of course, hope has its quirks. Men begin to argue over which bird is the best omen. Black backs mean beaches, one declares. No, forked tails mean lagoons, another counters, as if the birds had personally briefed them before takeoff. Someone claims the weed smells different, warmer, he says, inhaling theatrically like a river mouth. Another licks a reed, you stop him after the second lick, announcing it tastes less salty. Shipboard science at its finest. You make a joke about bottling vintage 1492 driftwater, and it earns a laugh wide enough to show gum still too tender to celebrate properly. The evenings turn ceremonial. When the sun lowers, every gaze pins itself to the rim of the world. No one pretends not to care now. Even the bell seems to ring more softly, as if afraid to disturb the light. You look until your eyes water, then keep looking. The clouds grow theatrical, pearl towers, citadels of gold, until some fool, you love him for it, cries, "Land," and earns a chorus of groans when the mirage dissolves into ordinary sky. "Buy that cloud a hat," someone mutters. "It's doing a fine impression." And underneath the playfulness, a sober thread. You remember the storm, the lash, the sour water, the bleeding gums, the glow that looked like witch fire. You remember garlic necklaces and rats with opinions. You remember how small a ship can feel in an ocean that doesn't care. Hope doesn't erase those things. It gathers them into a story you might actually want to tell. You whisper to the sea quietly, so no one accuses you of romance. All right then, show us. The wind freshens at dusk, cool and clean, as if travelling over leaves. You close your eyes and breathe until the inside of your head turns green. Somewhere far ahead, waves fold onto something that isn't water. You can't hear it, not yet, but your bones pretend they can. The ship hums a little different underfoot, a vibration more eager than weary. The night watch takes their places without the old sighs. Lanterns swing, ropes creak, and every man pretends he isn't practicing how he'll shout the word first. You lie back in your hammock, heart drumming like a small drum someone is too shy to bang, and you picture a dark line at dawn, low and solid, refusing to wave like clouds. You promise yourself you won't shout too soon, won't embarrass yourself into a flogging, won't cry. You will absolutely cry. The deck above you murmurs with boots, the hull tick-ticks with weed, and the sky outside the hatch bristles with 1,000 cold, friendly lamps. For the first time in a very long time, sleep finds you before dread does. The shout comes at dawn, not the half-joking cries of land that have punctuated sunsets for days, but a raw-throated yell that cracks like lightning. Tierra! The word leaps from man to man, swelling until it's less a voice and more a roar. You stumble from your hammock, nearly tripping over a rat that's just as startled as you are, and claw your way onto the deck. And there it is, a faint line across the horizon, darker than sea, more solid than cloud. At first it seems like a trick of light, but as the sun climbs, the shape sharpens. A ridge of green, rising where the ocean should end. You grip the rail until your knuckles whiten. You've imagined this moment for weeks, dreamed of it in fevers and half-sleeps, and yet your brain balks. Could it really be? Could something so simple as land actually exist after all that emptiness? The deck is chaos. Men laugh, weep, embrace, and clap one another on the back hard enough to bruise. Some drop to their knees, crossing themselves and kissing the planks. Others dance, their feet slapping the wet wood in clumsy rhythm. Even the officers crack small, cautious but real. Columbus stands tall at the prow, rosary in one hand, his face glowing with vindication. He looks less like a man and more like a sermon come alive. Historians still argue who truly sighted land first, whether it was Rodrigo de Triana aboard the Pinta, or Columbus himself claiming credit later. But here, in this moment, the debate is irrelevant. To you, it's simply land, undeniable and green, and it floods your body with relief so fierce you feel weak. Quirks of humanity spill into the moment. Some men scramble to ready gifts and tokens, as if preparing to greet kings instead of strangers. Others argue heatedly over who should set foot ashore first, their voices tinged with the desperation of men who want history to remember their names. One sailor, sobbing, clutches the little charm he tied around his ankle, whispering, "It worked, it worked." Another insists the birds told him personally where to look. Hope makes historians of everyone, rewriting facts in real time, and yet, under the joy, unease lingers. You can see it in the sideways glances in the tight set of jaws. What lies on that shore? Gold, spices, salvation or danger, disease, and war? The ocean may have been merciless, but it was predictable. Waves, storms, hunger, fear. Land is an unknown all its own. Some whisper about hostile people, others about beasts, still others about strange diseases lurking in the lush green. The joy falters at the edges, like a lantern guttering in wind. Still, preparations continue. The sails are trimmed, the course set, the ship inching toward the coast. The water grows shallower, changing colour from endless blue to a paler greener hue. More birds flock overhead, their cries sharp and jubilant. The smell intensifies, earthy, rich, alive. After weeks of rotten brine, the scent of vegetation is intoxicating. You breathe deeply until your lungs ache. That night, as the shore looms closer, the crew barely sleeps. Hammocks swing with restless bodies, men whispering plans, promises and prayers. Some dream aloud of gold mines, others of fruit trees, still others of simply lying on solid ground without swaying. You find yourself imagining the feel of dirt under your nails, the sound of leaves rustling instead of canvas flapping. You think about biting into something fresh, anything fresh, even a bitter green stalk, and your mouth waters. Historians still argue whether Columbus knew he had not reached Asia, but something entirely new. On deck, that debate doesn't matter. What matters is the green smudge becoming trees, the trees becoming forest, the forest promising everything you've longed for: rest, food, survival. Dawn comes again, brighter than any you can remember, and the crew gathers at the rail in silence. The land lies there, steady and undeniable. The ocean stretches behind you, vast and cruel, but before you is proof that the world doesn't end in waves. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sounds wash over you. Gulls calling, men murmuring, the sea soft against the hull. For the first time since Palos, your heart beats not with dread, but with something dangerously close to hope. The boat kisses the shallows, bumps again, and then the keel sighs into sand as if the ship itself is relieved to stop moving. When your feet finally touch the beach, the earth feels wrong steady. Yes, but your bones keep swaying on the inside, as though the whole island were secretly floating. You stand there a moment, hands on your knees, laughing and almost crying because the ground is still and you are not. Then you do what half the crew does without shame. You drop to your knees and kiss the sand. It tastes like salt and sun-warmed stone and something you barely remember. Safety. Everything is colour. Leaves so green they seem to ring in your ears. Flowers that look like the paint on a saint's robe come to life. The smell of crushed stems and damp earth pours over you until your head swims. A man next to you scoops a double handful of soil into his pockets, as if customs won't be invented for several centuries. Another lays himself flat and hugs the beach, whispering, "Don't move," to the island, which obliges. Columbus steps ashore in ceremony standard bearers, polished words, the sign of the cross. Flags unfurl, a prayer is said. You're not the sort to think in chronicles, but even you feel the edge of a page turning. Historians still argue whether this first landfall was on the island we now call San Salvador, Watlings, or another in the Bahamas chain, but arguments belong to desks. Here, the sand is under your nails, and the tide is already writing delicate lace over your boot prints. Fresh water becomes a miracle with a stream's voice. Men kneel and drink with both hands, then drink again, then splash their faces, not caring that they look like happy dogs. You do the same, and the sweetness shocks you. It is as if every foul cask aboard the Santa Maria is gently escorted out of memory. You bite a leaf from a low branch bitter, yes, but alive, and your scurvy tender gums sting and then strangely sigh. No one calls it a cure, but no one spits it out either. There are people here, watching from the trees with a stillness you cannot imitate. They are careful, composed, their hair and ornaments catching the sun. When they step forward, it is without hurrying, like people who belong to this light and do not need to prove it. Columbus offers bright cloth and small glass beads, standard gifts from a standard ritual, and they offer gestures, words you do not know, and the universal language of pointing. A canoe noses the shallows, graceful as a bird. Someone laughs softly, and the sound lifts something heavy from your chest. You try a word, fail, try again, then settle for a smile and a palm held open. Sometimes even across oceans, a hand is a hand. A mainstream fact settles itself among the trees. Columbus records in his journal that the people wear small ornaments of gold, and suddenly everyone is looking not at faces but at glints, foolish, hungry magpies in sunburnt shirts. You feel the fever rise in the officers' voices as they talk of islands beyond islands, of sources and mines, of maps that might fatten overnight. You back a step into shade, ashamed of nothing specific and everything in general. Quirks pop like seeds in heat. One sailor vows never to eat hardtack again and ceremoniously buries a biscuit with a tiny cross of twigs. Another claims the garlic he wore around his neck absolutely kept the storms away, and you would tease him if storms hadn't, in fact, failed to attend this morning. A rat-bowled envoy from the hull dashes down the gangplank, sniffs the jungle air, and decides to retire on the spot. You wish him luck and consider asking him to put in a good word with the island's more respectable residents. The work resumes even in paradise. Casks must be filled, the boat must ferry. The carpenter, saint of survival, must tap and listen to the timbers that carried you. The sails hang loose and contented like laundry after penance. You help haul water, an ordinary task that feels like sacrament. The stream runs cold over your hands. You think of phosphorescent nights and realise that this too is a kind of light. In the quiet between tasks, you sit under a palm and take inventory of what the sea kept and what it returned. It kept your old idea of comfort. It returned a new one that looks like shade and a calm lung. It kept the soft skin of your hands. It returned rope-thick palms that know exactly how much weight a wet line will take. It kept a measure of your pride. It returned something humbler, sturdier, less interested in speeches. You remember St. Elmo's fire writhing blue on the mast, the lash hissing against a back, the mutiny that almost spoke itself into being, and the glowing wake that made everyone whisper. You remember weevils, and you do not curse them. They were only proof the biscuit had once been real bread. Historians still argue whether Columbus understood, even dimly, that this shore was not Asia. You look at the water lacing itself into sand and think that oceans are very good at introducing people who think they know where they're going, to places that were not on their list. Your list, you realise, used to include survive. It still does, but it also includes sleep on unmoving ground, eat something green, and laugh without checking the sky first. Ambition can wait behind those three. At dusk, the island smells warm and faintly sweet, like fruit almost ready. Singing carries from somewhere beyond the palms. Voice is not yours. In a meter, your feet do not know yet. The crew's own songs float back, thinner, uncertain, but game. Someone jests that the birds here must be on the payroll, they're so charming. Someone else says the Queen will be thrilled. You privately hope she has better water than the casks ever did. When you lie down, it is on sand that remembers heat. The ground does not move, but you do. The sea's cradle is still rocking in your bones. You fold your arm beneath your head and try a promise out loud to no one in particular. If you ever see a barrel of fresh apples again, you will personally compose hymns to apples. You add a quiet second promise. You will not forget the carpenter's hammer, the boy who ran messages, the man who buried his biscuit, the officer who laughed exactly once in the worst of the storm. You went to the edge of the known world and discovered, somewhat to your surprise, that the edge is not a cliff but a seam messy, stitched and holding. You survived a voyage designed in every practical respect to make you fail. You will carry its habits a while, the way you count bells in your head, the way you brace your feet when someone says wind, the way you scan horizons by reflex. But you will also carry this, the taste of sweet water, the colour green that doesn't end, and the knowledge that fear, when tended carefully, can be persuaded to work the pumps until land appears. Let the day unfasten, slowly. Let the bright edge of the water soften to pearl, and the soft back and forth you still feel inside become smaller, quieter, like a cradle pushed by a tired hand. The ropes are coiled, the sails slack, the fire in the little galley a dot with no work left to do. Breathe as the leaves breathe. Imagine the green around you exhaling, cool and even, and trade your breath for that easy rhythm in and out, long and longer. You can let the ship drift away now, just a little. It was loud and it was hard and it taught you more than anyone asked you to learn, but it can drift. Set it on the horizon like a toy, a speck on a bright line, and let the line blur. Feel sand under the curve of your palm, warm where the day pooled its light, cool where the evening is already beginning, and notice how the ground holds still for you, the way a friend holds a promise without comment. Somewhere, water moves over stones. Somewhere a bird folds its wings and decides night is close enough to start. Close your jaw where it has been clenched for days. Soften the tongue. Let the small muscles behind the eyes grow calm. You are allowed to be a little island, firm and quiet, while the rest of the world moves around you. The sea can keep its stories for a while. You have earned silence. If thoughts arrive, let them arrive gently and then go. If they want names, storm, hunger, fear, give them smaller names, wind, salt, night, and watch them step back. There is room now for sleep to come over the dune like a slow tide, filling the hollows, leaving the world smooth and simple. Stay here, breathe, rest. The horizon will be right where you left it in the morning.